Oh. Okay, hello everyone. I'm just going to noodle around for a second or two just while we get started and hit 10 o'clock. Hopefully you can hear me. I've got all the same stream settings that I used last time. So if you can't hear me, let me know. And you should be able to hear the piano as well. Carl Granger, greetings from Kuala Lumpur. Hi Carl, how you doing? Hey, Jeroen, how you doing? Sounding good. Right, I'm pleased you can hear me. Hope all's well in the Netherlands. Cool, okay, so it's 10 o'clock, let's get started. Those of you... Oh, Hull's here as well. Hi, Hull. Hi from Swansea, looking forward to helping making the transition from playing a range of keyboards to piano, particularly what to do with my left hand. Well, we might talk about that in a few minutes, Hull. That's quite a good one to maybe talk about. So, those of you who don't know me, and most of you will know me, I'm Bill, and in this session I'm going to kind of do something very similar to what I did a couple of weeks ago in an evening session and just do a general Q&A, but with a particular focus on beginners, because an awful lot of people out there at the moment are teaching themselves how to play the piano under lockdown, and I've seen a real surge of people starting the instrument or picking it up after a long period of time away. So hit me up with any questions. I won't be able to answer all of them. I'm really sorry about that because I got loads and loads last time. And what I will probably try to do is prefer those questions that are more kind of beginners oriented. So, you know, if you want to ask a really complicated question about harmony or something, forgive me if I don't deal with that. I might say to you, drop me an email or whatever, or I'll deal with that in a future session, because today I really want to focus on kind of beginning and improving and that kind of thing. That's not to say, we can't talk about other stuff as well. Hey, David Ass, hi. Alex Needham, hi, Alex. Alex is a very old friend of mine. We used to play together in our school jazz band. I've just advertised the fact that this is happening on my own Facebook feed, so probably lots of my friends are going to turn up and start making fun of me. Okay, Nihar, how to practice dynamics in right hand while arpeggiating and also playing melody with the same right hand. Okay, so let's start off talking about dynamics. And Hua was talking about left hand as well. Okay, so what I'll probably do for a minute or two is just talk about the way we combine left and right hand, because it's a question that comes up again and again and again and again and again, and particularly how we manage dynamics. So lots of people get really, really worried about their left hand. Let me just improvise for a couple of minutes and then talk about what I'm doing. So let's pick a key. Let's pick F major. So that was really kind of random playing about just with some diatonic chords of F major. In other words, the chords that the F major that are produced from the F major scale. Now, in terms of what you're talking about there in dynamics in right hand, Nihar, it's very much a case of thinking about dynamics across the whole thing, really. So 3/4 of practicing your dynamics is always listening to what you're doing. Something I always come back to when I'm talking about playing the piano is the fact that when you're playing, especially if you're relatively new to the instrument, it's really, really easy just to focus on kind of pressing the keys. Like, am I getting this key right? Am I getting that key right? Is that chord right? And not listen to what you're doing. So you know, an awful lot of getting your dynamics right is actually paying attention to the sound you're making, which sounds kind of ridiculous, you know, because people think, well, you know, I'm sat at the piano, of course I'm listening to what I'm doing. And actually it's really easy to kind of tune out of what you're doing. So the first thing I would say about practicing dynamics in the right hand knee heart is just focus on listening. So what you could, for example, do is have a bit of a practice session where you're not too worried about making mistakes. You kind of give yourself permission to make mistakes, but you listen to the sound you're making. And as you do that, as you really focus on that sound you're making, you should find that the dynamics start to come much more naturally. I mean, obviously there are kind of more kind of mechanical things you can do as well. So just playing scales using dynamics, starting really quietly and getting louder and getting softer again. So things like that, but 3/4 of it really is listening to yourself. Okay, Rob Horton. Hi Bill, hi Rob. I got back into music about 3 or 4 years after stopping in my teens about 20 years ago. Loads of people in that situation. It's a really common situation. Your channel and books have been a great help. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure, Rob. I always like to hear from people who are benefiting from what I do. Likewise, Mark, thank you for your time. No problem at all. I actually really enjoy it. Cool. The Real Winslet fan. 10 AM, I'm working, dude. Well, so am I. Yeah, there'll be another evening one soon. Okay. Graham, morning. After learning which keys are which and playing very easy songs, where do I go from here? Okay, so that's really getting into the heart of what piano learning is about. That seems like a really simple question, Graham, but actually it's a really interesting one. Where you go from here is in any direction that you find challenging. So getting better at any musical instrument, including the piano, is always a process of doing stuff that is challenging but achievable. Okay, so your brain won't kind of lay down the new skills, it won't kind of build the new circuits that you need to be a better piano player unless you kind of stretch it. But you can't stretch it too hard, you can't do stuff that's too difficult. You have to find a kind of sweet spot of stuff that is, as I said, challenging but achievable. And if you have a piano teacher, they do that for you. Yeah, but obviously a lot of people don't have piano teachers. So what I would say is, you know, you can play very easy songs. Now just try and find material which is slightly less easy and which makes you sweat a bit more and work on that. And when you can do that, find stuff which is, you know, a little bit more difficult. So it's just kind of, I mean, and this is a real problem for people who are self-teaching. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, writing about it. It's about identifying the material which is kind of in that sweet spot of, you know, challenging but achievable. Yeah, we could maybe talk about some suggestions for you later. Alex is listening while homeschooling my six-year-old. I'll just put him on. Yeah, he'll learn a lot. Joe, hi Bill. I'm wondering what's the most effective way to learn to walk the bass while comping in the right hand. Okay, I was talking. Let's look at this. This is quite an interesting one because even if you're not interested in walking bass lines, this is a good one to talk about with hand independence. Let's look at a simple walking bass line. I'm going to go out of shot here, but you can kind of get the idea. So I've got a walking bass line down there. I could have used a more complex, you know, kind of boogie woogie walking bass. Getting a bit splashy there, but that kind of thing. So what's the most effective way to learn how to do that while comping in the right hand? For those of you who don't know what comping is short for accompanying. It's about playing chords so that you can kind of, as I was there, so that someone could sing over the top. I'm not going to sing, don't worry, but you know, say you were playing Fly Me to the Moon, which is the song I was on with there. Play a bit higher this time so you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, what I'm doing there is just kind of jabbing those chords, playing a comp that somebody could play over the top of. Now, the most effective way of learning to do that is to start really, really, really slowly, even slower than you think you have to. So literally, really, really, really slow it down and gradually speed it up. It's incredibly frustrating. Yeah, I remember learning how to, for example, play blues when I was a teenager in my school jazz band with Alex, and I sat for ages working on this pattern. Okay, which is a really kind of simple, seems simple, kind of rolling, walking bass, whatever you want to call it, an ostinato bass, just with triplet chords over the top. And that literally is like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, yeah? So doing that kind of thing, taking it steady and accepting that it is difficult. Everybody finds it difficult. And the people who get good at it are those who push through the difficulty. Okay, so Joe, I hope that makes sense. John from South Africa, thank you. Newbie like to play like a pro. Well, keep working at it. I think anyone can. Farouk, hi to you as well. Joe, also wondering, another one from Joe, what are your simple favourite minor voicings? Okay, so simple minor chords. I don't really have minor voicings. I have particular minor extensions that I like. So I kind of like the A minor 11 sound. The minor 11 sound I'm playing it as an A minor 11 there. That's one you can use a great deal. So going back to that that chord progression I was playing earlier there. Yeah, loads of different things you can play around with minor chords. Nihar, thanks a lot, no problem. Song of Nature, hello, I'm an intermediate classical piano player. How much time do I need to learn and improvise jazz? Good question. Probably less than you think. Because you will have an awful lot of the keyboard skills if you've learned classical piano and the kind of the intuitive keyboard skills that you need. What you'll have to do to move from classical to jazz is almost start to see the instrument as a different instrument. Yeah, it's a completely different way of thinking about the piano in some ways. Obviously a lot of the underlying harmony is the same, the scales you're using are often the same, but it's a very, very different approach. And you kind of have to get out of the mental habit of I will read the music and transfer that to the keyboard, to a habit of mind that's much more kind of exploratory and adventurous and willing to play around and willing to make, inverted commas, mistakes and then judge yourself on the sound you're making. Yeah, I've got quite a few videos on my YouTube channel about how to get started with jazz. So there's one that I did ages ago, the 4-minute jazz piano tutorial, which you could go to just to get a flavour for it. Just search Bill Hilton 4-minute jazz piano. And also I've got a course of excuse me, of jazz piano lessons. So have a look at those. You'll probably find you take them quite quickly, but as I say, most of it, if you're a classical player, is about kind of putting to one side your conceptions about how the instrument works. Yeah, you have as a classical player, you have some overwhelming advantages to do with touch and expression and control and all that kind of thing, but you also need to just get in a kind of different habit of mind. Okay, hi Bill, I'm totally new to the piano, looking for a good structured step-by-step online course, something that will tell me where to start and what to do next. Can you recommend any? Yes, I can. I can recommend mine because it's free. If you go to my YouTube channel and just search in YouTube Bill Hilton Beginner's Course, it's a 20-part course. You don't have to pay anything for it. There are loads of downloadable PDFs and things like that. So I would say start there, yeah, because lots of others, yeah, you can pay loads of money for them, and there are apps and things, but not many of them are that great, to be honest. Don't quote me on that. So have a look at my course. You know, I designed it for beginners to be a free course, and lots of people seem to like it. Do try that. Martin, what chords can I play so I can improvise in my right hand so it sounds good? Well, that's kind of a big question, Martin. What I would say there, again, I'm gonna do this a lot and send you to my channel. Go to my channel and look at my playlist of tutorials on chords, and that will help. Johnny Joseph, I started my piano lesson at the age of 37. Could you please suggest how long to practice daily for decent or good progress? That is a really good question, Johnny. Daily practice, including the dreaded scales. The really important thing is frequency rather than amount. Yeah, it is so difficult to practice, if you can, every day, or 6 days a week if you don't want to do it every day. But it doesn't matter about practicing ages and ages every day. So 20 minutes every day of the week is much better than 2 hours once or twice a week, if you see what I mean. So the thing you really need to do, Johnny, is to practice daily for 20 or 30 minutes, and that's all really it takes. That's about what I do, to be honest, and that's about what I've always done. You know, when I was at university and stuff, and having to work on things like classical music, which isn't my kind of natural skill, and I practice a lot more. But just to kind of think, you know, just to keep that kind of general improvement going, 20 or 30 minutes a day, but every day. That's the really important thing. And also make sure that your practice isn't just playing. You're not just playing stuff you can do. Practice is all about challenging yourself and doing stuff that is difficult. So they should be 20 minutes every day that you find challenging. Once you stop finding it challenging, you're not practicing effectively. You need to move on, find something more difficult, and challenge yourself. And also play your scales every day, okay, if you can. I mean, I know it's really boring, but it really helps. Are hand-on exercises in keys other than C really good? So hand-on exercises are basically loads of complicated arpeggios and scales and stuff. Short answer, yes. I find them pretty challenging, says Helkai. Good. If you find them challenging, that means they are useful. Again, it's a point I make over and over and over again. Anything you find difficult but achievable, challenging but achievable, that is good. Okay, Joywin. Chords finger position. Kind of a laconic kind of question there, kind of brief question. A lot of people ask about what is the right finger position for chords, and people say, oh, it should be 1, 3, 5 or 1, 2, 4. The short answer is it doesn't matter, or it does matter, but it all depends on context. It depends where you're going next. So say if you're playing a C major triad, 1, 3, 5 is absolutely fine, but if you've got to hit this C up here next, it probably makes more sense to play 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 4, probably 1, 2, 3 actually, because then you've got your pinky ready to go to the 5th. Prisco, I keep forgetting my notes. When I go back to a piece I thought I'd done so well in, I struggle to remember the notes. It's frustrating. Join the club, okay? I'm like that. Loads of people are like that. Memorising music is actually quite hard, and when you do it, I find it tends to happen by accident. With, you know, if I set out to memorise something, I find it really difficult. But something I'm not setting out to memorise, I'll end up memorising, just kind of by the by. Don't worry, I mean, struggling to remember the notes can be an advantage, because then that forces you to focus on the music and improve your sight reading skills. Okay, I'm very good at playing, says Jimmy, so I'm very good at playing with right hand, even I can recognise notes by just listening. Good ear skills, but how do I accompany it with left hand? Okay, big question. 2 things to say, Jimmy. First of all, go and look at some of my tutorials on, you know, left hand patterns and things like that. But don't worry about doing too much. You know, so many people think, and this affects everybody. So many people think that you have to do loads and loads of things with your left hand. So when I was a kid, I used to think that my left hand had to be constantly moving. Yeah. Okay, I was always doing stuff like that, and I realised I could get away with so less. HK Justice, so much talking. Yeah, how else? People always come on my YouTube channel and say, hey, you talk so much. You know, how else am I supposed to explain things? You know. Any tips for left-hand arpeggios for fake books? I need to get away from a blocky left hand. Okay, Carl, good question. Left-hand arpeggios for fake books. So for those of you who don't know, a fake book is something like this, where you have, hopefully I'm in shot there, where you have a book with melody and chords, and you've got the melody, and you kind of need to accompany it and stuff like that. We'll maybe talk more about fake books in a few minutes. How do you work on arpeggios to accompany them? An awful lot of that, Carl, is just working on your arpeggio skills. But bear in mind that when you're accompanying, you need to spread out your arpeggios in the left hand and think of them more as broken chords. So an arpeggio is where you break up a chord and play every note in the chord, yeah? Whereas if we just talk about a broken chord, we might not be playing every note in the chord. So if you look at the way I played that arpeggio there, I didn't play the E down the bottom there. I just played C, G, C, E, G, C. Now there's a reason for that, okay? If I played all of them, let's say I'm playing some chords up here, I get a really kind of muddy sound down there. If when we're playing bass parts, a really important thing to do on the piano is to play bass notes fairly well spaced apart, okay? And the reason for that is because the lower a note is on the piano keyboard, the more audible overtones it has. So any note you play on the piano keyboard is what we call a complex tone. It's the original note plus a whole bunch of overtones going up from it, okay? And if you play a lot of low notes, a lot of those overtones are in the audible range, and if you play them down here, they sound really kind of muddy, and that happens even when you're playing an arpeggio because you've got the sustain pedal down, okay? Yeah, so what we do when we're typically improvising with arpeggios is space out the lower notes. You know, if you look at classical composers who use arpeggios, if you look at Brahms and people like that, they really space out the lower notes. When you're thinking about, Carl, when you're thinking about improvising with arpeggios, broken chords, think of them in those terms, kind of, you know, take the song you're interested in working on and maybe just practice the broken chord by itself. And remember, it's much easier and usually more effective to go up rather than down, yeah? Because you're trying to create a bass sound. Typically you're using your pedal, so starting with a lower note gives you that bass sound at the start of the bar, okay, or at the start of the new chord, or whatever. Whereas if you're starting at the top and going down, you still get the movement of the broken chord, but you don't get that kind of chunky, satisfying bass sound. Also, it's physically easier to come up the piano rather than go down it. Okay, I'm gonna have to miss some of these out because we're getting quite a lot of questions. TLS, how to apply a 2-5-1 chord into a song or lead sheet? Usually they're there already. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, a 2-5-1 progression, let's say we're in the key of C major, we have a certain number of natural chords in that key, diatonic chords, C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished and C. And a 2-5-1 progression is a very, very common chord progression resolving back to the tonic chord, the number 1 chord, and it's using the number 2 note of the scale, D minor, number 5 note of the scale, G in C, and then back to 1. So how do you apply it? It's not really a question of applying it, because if you're playing a song that has a 2-5-1 progression, it's already there. But there are various things you can do to decorate it and improve it. So, you know, a really common one would be to take that number 2 chord and make it a minor 7. So if we're in the key of C, then D minor to D minor 7, and then the G to G7, and then the C. And you can even start to substitute and play around. So a really common substitution I like is your 2, D minor 7, and then substitute the D minor 7 over G for the regular 5 chord, because it still gives you a good dominant kind of feeling. It really wants to go back to the tonic and back to 1. So it's not a question of applying, but it's a question of when you identify a 2-5-1, thinking, what can I do with it? Can I make this more interesting? Can I play around with it? What inversions, what voicings do I need to use? Carlotta, hello Carlotta again. Any tips to improve staccato? Staccato scales really help, actually. Yeah. Staccato, for those of you who don't know, is when we play a note with a bit of a bounce, okay, when it's a little bit detached. Staccato notes are notated with a regular note head. Usually it's a quarter note or an eighth note, a crotchet or a quaver, just with a dot over the top, not a dot next to it. That's different, that's extending the length of the note, but a dot over the top is staccato. I'm going to try to pronounce my Italian properly today, because I know I have quite a few Italian followers and they always tell me off, quite rightly, if I get my Italian pronunciation wrong. Okay, got my fingering on the C major scale there. Okay, so Carlotta, just try, and you can always tell when I find something a bit challenging because I stop talking while I do it. Just try to play your scales staccato. The other thing you can try to do is staccato broken chords. But instead of doing this, as you would in a normal broken chord exercise, just take the chord shape, hit it 3 times with a staccato. Yeah? The trick with staccato, and I'm actually a really bad example here because I have this very peculiar kind of physiology in my wrist and lower arm, Carlotta, but the trick with staccato is to kind of make the bounce a combination of your wrist and lower arm. Yeah, it's, you know, you can just do it with your finger, and a lot of classical pianists, you will see them just staccatoing with their finger, with their fingers, but I think when you're improvising, especially, then, you know, getting that little movement from your wrist and lower arm and keeping it relaxed and kind of springy My piano teacher, or one of my old piano teachers, always used to say to me, imagine your wrist is a very stiff spring, so there's control in there, but there's also kind of energy stored up in there. It can bounce easily and spring back. Hope that helps. So try the chords, try the staccato scales. Gino, hey Bill, after being able to play a piece note for note to the end, how should I polish it to performance level? Really good question. My motto is always attack the problem. So even in a piece that you have nearly all the way down and that is really good, there will be certain areas that are weak. And it's really tempting when you're really good at a piece just to play it through and through and through over and over again. But that's not a very efficient way of practicing. Yeah, you are mostly practicing stuff you can play. The thing to do, and this is true of all practice, but especially at the polishing stage, is just to identify the weak points. There will be one measure, one bar, which just isn't quite right, and home in on it and play it over and over and over and over again, and then gradually kind of build out, play the bar before, that bar, and the bar after. So I automatically talk about bars rather than measures, but when you hear me say bar, replace it with measure, if that's your language, and then build out more, play 2 bars in advance, then the problem bar, then 2 bars afterwards, so you can kind of lock it in, yeah? But it's about attacking the problem, homing in on the difficult bits, rather than just playing over and over. There is a role for just playing over and over and over, but the risk there is that you end up practicing inefficiently. Cyril, while improvising in right hand, what are the minimum number of notes to play in the left hand? None, basically. Cyril, it depends on, or Kirill, I might be pronouncing your name wrong, I suspect it's Cyril, but we'll go with that. None is the minimum number, because if you're playing with a rhythm section behind you, then you don't necessarily need any left-hand notes at all. What people tend to do is assume that they need more in their left than actually is the case. I was talking about this a minute ago, whereas actually you can get by with fewer notes in the left hand and less movement than you think as well. Okay, so a very common thing jazz piano players do is to use shell chords, which is what I was doing there. So instead of playing a full E flat major 7 chord, I was just playing the E flat and the D, the major 7th note, and that gave me the sense of the chord. And on the B flat major 7, yeah. The reason shell chords are good are for they deal with the audible overtones issue that I was talking about a second ago. As you go farther down the piano, it's not really a problem in this key, but say you were in F, if you were to play a full chord there, really chunky, lots of audible overtones, better to play the shell chord. So you can get away, Cyril, with not playing many notes and just kind of, holding the chord often. So just then when I played that little bit of improv, I wasn't really moving my left hand very much, but keeping the rhythm going with the right. Gary, when trying to memorise chords, do you learn the individual notes or the hand shape? The individual notes is the short answer to that. So let's say we're trying to learn the chord of B flat major. There is our chord of B flat major. What I would do is learn the notes B flat, D, F. Understand the basic principle that any combination of those 3 notes I play anywhere on the piano is a chord of B flat. So these are all B flat chords. Doesn't matter which note I'm playing in the bass, they're just different inversions of the chord. Any combination of B flat, F and D is a B flat chord. Now, when it comes to trying to memorise them, what I wouldn't do is just sit there saying B flat, B flat, B flat. I would find music in the key of F or B flat which features that chord and then play it, because first of all, that's far more enjoyable, but also it means you're kind of internalising how chords work in context, if you see what I mean. So get a songbook or something. Hold on, I got one of these ready. When I was a kid, I spent hours and hours and hours working through things like this. So, compilation books of kind of classic show tunes, really. And I would generally ignore the piano parts and kind of use them as lead sheets. I would use the melody line and the chords, and that's really how I learned an awful lot about chords. That and playing in my school jazz band, as I did. But going through going through lots of songs is by far the best way of learning chords, rather than trying to brute force memorize them. Where is that interesting one I just saw? Some Kind of Sophia. Good morning, Bill. I'm an intermediate player, but I still struggle to read music. Hey, me as well. Because I almost always remember a piece once I've played it, once or twice maybe. Yeah, you have a good memory. Interesting. Do you have any tips for me? Yes. A lot of people have this problem. Some people are very good at memorizing stuff. So if you memorize something after you've seen it, it's very easy to then just to play it without the music. One thing I would try to do is, even though you've memorized it, read along with the music as you go, Sophia, okay? Because even that helps you improve your sight reading. Things that have helped me improve my reading of music over the years have been playing things over and over and over again while reading the tune, and or reading the right hand, left hand, whatever. I genuinely think that helps. So don't think you have to constantly be moving on to new pieces of music just to practice your reading. You can do it with stuff you already know if you read at the same time as you play. The real wins that found it's so much easier to memorize things you like. Yeah, absolutely. Nikola Vukovic. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right there. Nicola, I suspect. Stress on the middle syllable. Anyway, I don't have a question, but I have to say thank you. You're the reason I brought a piano. Big responsibility on me there. Well, thanks. That's a great honour. I'm glad it's helped. Any questions, Nicola? Give me a shout. Sumia, hello Sumia, you were here last time, I think. Yeah, hey Bill, I've seen many cover artists play arpeggios, broken chords under the right hand melody. I've tried it many times but never quite achieved it the way I want. Can you give some tips? Well, what I was saying to I think it was Gary a few minutes ago about spreading out your arpeggios, broken chords. Yeah, it's worth understanding the difference between arpeggios and broken chords. Arpeggios are a type of broken chord. So any broken chord is where you have a chord and you play the constituent notes, yeah, not necessarily all of them. An arpeggio is where you play all of them. So that's an arpeggio on C major, and this is a broken chord on C major, okay? So often when we talk about left-hand arpeggios, what we actually mean are broken chords. So what I was saying a few minutes ago, and if you missed that, then go back and look at the video once we're done and once it's live on YouTube, which will be about an hour probably after we've finished the tutorial. Spread them out down the bottom. In terms of practicing them, just take away the right hand, basically, and spend a lot of time doing that. Practice mostly going up. Going down is harder and up is more useful, okay? But as I said, go back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, and that should help you, Sumia. Somu, how are you? I'm really good, thank you. I'm really enjoying myself. Farouk, hi Bill, a quick question. What's the best way to approach music composition in a rational mindset, not relying on luck to find good melody? That is a very profound and interesting question, Farouk, and I'm actually going to talk about it. You might think that is not beginners related, but it is, because I have this very strong feeling that people should, I always say the day you become a musician is the day you become a composer. Everyone should try composing music. How do you do it rationally and not relying on luck? Difficult. I'm not sure that anyone has ever, or I've ever done it rationally, purely, I've got this note, then I will use this interval, then this interval. Sometimes, yes, if you're writing words to music, music to words, for example. Carl, thanks a lot. Yeah, good. I'm glad that was helpful, Carl. Sorry, back to Farouk. But a lot of the time it comes from taking a single musical idea and building it out. So let's say you've got a musical idea. Let's say you're in the key of F major and your musical idea is something as simple as 4 notes. Okay, so that's the start of my melody. Now, what could I do from there? Well, I could try going to a B flat. Yeah, so now I've got a little bit of a characteristic coming to this melody, and it's repeated A, so I could try that again. Bum ba dum bum, bum ba da dun dun da da dun dun. Yeah, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to describe. It's also a question. Something you can do rationally is try to give your melodies shape. Okay, so this melody would probably want to reach a peak of pitch at some point. Okay, and there I've got to a natural point for the dominant chord. So yes, you can do it rationally, Farouk. It's difficult to do it entirely rationally, and a great deal of it depends on your ear. Okay, a great deal of it depends on that very kind of mysterious creativity. And this sounds like a cop-out. This sounds like me trying to give an easy answer, but it isn't. Often you will find the best way to come up with melodies to really work on it in that rational way, and you won't find an answer, but then go off and have a shower or do the washing up or something, and you will find that your subconscious brain kind of works on it, and then in the middle of the night it will kind of pop out with an answer. As I said, that's very vague, that's very wishy-washy, but that is how creativity seems to work. It helps to have an idea to start with, and you can come up with those rationally, you know, just by following a chord shape. Yeah, I might use that one for something. Who knows? There we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to skip. As I said, I'm gonna have to skip some of these questions because so many of them are coming in. Marlag, hi Bill. I'm okay with accompanying and starting improvising. Good. Where do I go next? I'm stuck. Any step-by-step course for intermediate level? I'm actually thinking about doing a step-by-step tutorial course for intermediate players, because I've got my beginner's course, which hopefully a lot of you have seen or been through. But a lot of people are asking for intermediate stuff. So yes, a step-by-step intermediate course might be on the way. The advice I would give you, Marmag, is to find stuff that challenges you. Yeah, what's probably happened is that you're stuck on a plateau. When you're learning anything, your progress tends to go like this. You have this very steep acceleration and then a plateau as you reach, you know, a level you're good at. And what you have to do is try to break off that plateau. And probably the reason you're on the plateau is that you are now not challenging yourself as much as you were when you were learning your accompanying and improvisation to start with. So when you were going through that initial process, you probably found it really frustrating and challenging and all the rest of it. You need to kind of put yourself in that situation again, but with more difficult music, if you see what I mean, because you know, your brain will only learn stuff, it will only develop new skills if you challenge it. Okay, so it's about finding challenging material. But yes, I mean, and you know, and that's why beginners courses get gradually more difficult, and that's why all teaching gets gradually more difficult. You know, if you're doing maths, you start off doing addition and you end up doing, you know, differential calculus or whatever, and it gets gradually more difficult. But the challenge, the level of difficulty remains the same. So I'm teaching my little boy how to do basic sums at the moment, and he finds 5 add 3 as difficult as I found, you know, doing more sort of advanced maths when I was at school. And the way you learn is by keeping that level of challenge up, basically. Carl says, happy lockdown to all you stir crazy piano bashers. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely echo that. Right. Susie, I just wanted to say I decided to learn piano 2.5 years ago, and your videos, especially the beginner series, absolutely made my first steps. Thank you very much. No, thank you. I'm really glad you liked them. That makes it all worthwhile for me. Okay, Cyril, thank you for your answer. No problem. Patrick, I'm a beginner. Any advice on hand independence and reading scores? Okay, hand independence. This is a good hand independence exercise. I've got a whole series on called Train Your Piano Brain, Patrick, which you might find useful because it's full of those sort of exercises. I mean, I was talking about that particular one a minute or two ago that I did when I was a kid, playing this rolling bass pattern with triplets over the top. And even now, I struggle to do it. I struggle to do it while talking at the same time. It's still challenging. So, to roll that back a bit, Patrick, first piece of advice I'll give you on hand independence is don't worry about it too much. Very few pianists ever totally master hand independence. Okay, if you're a very, very high-end sight reader, classical player, jazz player, whatever, then your hand independence will be very good. But it remains difficult for almost everybody to do very different things at the same time. Yeah. So if your hands do not feel particularly independent, don't worry, yeah? Because it's going to stay that way. It stays that way for everybody. But in terms of improving it, then just doing different things in each hand will help. So, you know, that kind of pattern that I was showing you there. Just sit there, copy that. Again, I can't do it and talk at the same time, because that shows how difficult it is, really. This kind of pattern, as I say, it's very much the patting your head and rubbing your stomach type thing. As long as your two hands are doing quite different things, that will push you into improving your hand independence. The secret, though, as I said earlier, Patrick, is to put yourself in a position where you're doing something that is challenging but achievable. It has to be challenging, else you won't improve, but it also has to be achievable, because then you won't improve either. It'll be too difficult, you'll get frustrated, you'll give up. And that's one of the great difficulties that self-teachers really face. If you have a piano teacher, they will find challenges for you that are just in that sweet spot of challenging but achievable. The challenge you have to overcome if you're a beginner self-teacher is finding that stuff that is difficult but that you can do. But always be doing things that are difficult, always be challenging yourself, because that's how you improve. Rafael Gallego, what is the most beautiful piece of classical music for you? Difficult. Really difficult. I probably couldn't say. Single most beautiful. Some of Grieg's choral music, maybe. There's a Grieg choral piece called Ave Maris Stella. It's a setting of the Marian hymn Ave Maris Stella. Edvard Grieg, go and look it up, because I think that's lovely. But too many to name apart from that. Joe Bob Gaming, hey, I watched the first 5 beginner piano lessons about a month ago, but I ended up losing interest from demotivation. Any tips for me in this situation? Difficult, Joe. Human motivation is a very difficult area. It's because, you can tell yourself rationally that if I really, really work at this, I know I'll get better. But that doesn't affect your mood or your motivation or whatever. Something that you might find useful is to record yourself, okay? Because you're always actually a little bit better than you think you are when you're practicing. So do a little bit of practice, play around with things and record it, or video yourself, then watch back. And the chances are you might think, well, actually, yeah, I'm not as bad as I thought I was. That sounded pretty good. And that's kind of motivating. The only thing ultimately that will motivate you is a feeling of progress and a feeling of reward. Even other people saying, hey, yeah, that sounds great. That doesn't work. That's not quite as motivating as that feeling of achievement. So you've got to try and work on achieving something and seeing your own achievement. And that kind of tells your brain that, hey, yeah, this is worth pursuing. Yeah. But agreed, it's a very difficult thing to do. A lot of it really is just gritting your teeth and saying, yes, I know I can do this. Ashwin, I just started trying to learn to reharmonize songs, but I'm currently just using trial and error. Are there any techniques or videos I can have a look at to learn more? Really interesting. That's getting into the subject of functional harmony. I have tutorials on that. If you go onto my YouTube channel and look for a video called How to Find the Chords for Any Song, or something like that. Google Bill Hilton How to Find Chords for Song and you'll find it, and that will take you through the basics of functional harmony and how to do basic reharmonization and stuff. Gino, thanks for answering my question previously. I have one more, and it's a really good one, Gino. When should you move on to another piece after finishing the current one? Kind of when you feel like it. I often work on 2 or 3 different things at the same time, and I would say I wouldn't wait until you've achieved perfection on one until you move on to the other. I would let them overlap a little bit. Kind of, this is something again I've been thinking about a lot recently, but those kind of overlapping challenges just to keep you pushing, pushing your improvement. And the important thing, Gino, is that piece number 2 is slightly more challenging than piece number 1. Yeah, so overlap them slightly by all means. Apuku, how do I use scales in chords for improvisation? Okay, let me improvise a little bit, because some people are always get annoyed that I don't play enough in these things. So let me play a bit, and then let's look at what I did. Okay. Hold on, Patrick. Train your piano playing. Yes, doing those, they're great, but it's tough. Yes, it's supposed to be tough, Patrick. That's the whole point. Yeah, good. Keep doing those, and as I say, don't sweat it too much. Don't worry too much about hand independence. Okay, back to Apoku. Let's do some very simple improvisation. I'll just play kind of pop piano, ballad piano style in the key of C major. Okay, now, Apugga, if you watch what I was doing there, maybe you want to go back and watch the tutorial, the session through again afterwards to really see, you'll see that I was using notes entirely from the scale of C major in my right hand when I was improvising, okay? I wasn't paying too much attention to the actual chords in the left hand, because here's a really important rule. If you are playing in a fairly straight style, that kind of poppy ballady style, in a particular key, you can use more or less any note from the scale of that key over more or less any chord that is diatonic, that is naturally occurring in that key. You know, the chord's built off the scale, and it will sound at least kind of okay. There are a couple of notes you need to be careful with, the 4th and the 7th degrees of the scale, okay, especially the 7th, the so-called leading tone, which will always try to take you up to C, and over some chords that might sound, you know, not bad exactly, but it's a very distinctive kind of sound. Yeah, or if you were to play an F over a C chord, it wants to resolve somewhere. One way around that is to stick to using the pentatonic scale. So that's the regular major scale of C major, but C pentatonic. And if you've got a chord progression in the key of C major, you will find that the pentatonic notes are always safe. Yeah. Oh yeah, the other one to watch out for is if you're playing the dominant in the left. Playing the tonic note over the top can be a little bit iffy sometimes. But yeah, going for the pentatonic. So people often think, right, I'm playing this chord, therefore I need to play notes from the chord. I'm playing this chord, therefore I need to play notes from the chord. So don't fret too much about that. Focus much more on the scale of the key. Once you get into more complex styles like jazz, then it starts to get a bit more challenging, because then you can begin to vary. So, you know, if we were playing something jazzy, then I could just use the scale of the key. But also, to get that jazzy sound, I probably want to include, you know, some, you know, flat seconds or some notes from the blues scale. Yeah, but very basically think much more in terms of the key and the scale rather than worrying about the chords. When you get non-diatonic chords, that starts to get different. You know, if we had our progression in C and suddenly introduced a B flat chord, then you have a couple of choices. You can stick to just improvising in your scale, on your scale of C, which will give you quite a distinctive sound, but might maybe what you want, or you can begin to vary things and use some notes from the non-diatonic chord, the chord that isn't naturally occurring in the key of C. But very broadly, stick to the scale. Hopefully that was useful. Sumya, again, another question, another good one. Sometimes I feel like everything I play is starting to sound the same. Do you think classical piano could help? Yes. Absolutely, it helps me. I'm terrible at it, but it really helps me. And if yes, can you suggest some pieces to start? Sumi, if you look at my beginners series, there are 20 tutorials there, and I can't remember which ones the tutorials are, but if you look through the playlist, you'll see them. There is, what is a tutorial on a piece called Minuet in G by Christian Petzold. It's in the Anna Magdalena notebook, because for years people thought it was by J.S. Bach, but there's a free PDF of the score and the video. And then Für Elisa is a really good one, and I have a tutorial on that as well with downloadable score, so have a look at those. You're playing simple fugues. Here comes the authentic voice of the organist. Playing simple fugues in 2 voices can help hand independence, or just a canon. Yeah, so simple canons, things like Pachelbel's canon in G, can really help hand independence. Jeroen is an organist and a much better hand independence person to talk to than me, because organists have to do this crazy stuff all the time, and they use their feet as well. They have a whole different keyboard down there. I just don't know how they do it. Ashwin, awesome, thanks so much. No, it's a pleasure. Okay. Mark Vansner or Wansner. When practicing new music, is there a general rule of thumb to make sure you're playing with good fingering technique, such as trying to spread your fingers out evenly or something? Good question. Rule of thumb. Little bit of a pun there. I like that, Mark. There isn't. Choosing good fingers is, I don't know if you play pool or snooker, but it's a similar kind of enterprise to that. If you watch a good pool player or a good snooker player, when they're playing the shot that they're playing, they're always thinking about the next shot and maybe the one after that. I guess chess is the same. You know, a good chess player is thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. And when you're thinking about your fingering on the piano, you should be doing the same thing. So the fingering that you're working on isn't just a case of solving the current problem, but it's about where you're going to go next, if you see what I mean. So I've got a piece that I'm composing at the minute. Those of you who tuned into my previous live session will have heard a bit of it. I'm composing a piece for a tutorial, and it's got an awful lot of broken chords in it. So here are some broken chords here. Let me just play that pattern for you. Okay, and there's a tiny bit of, I'll play the other bit over the top. Okay, so look at the fingering problem I've got there. It's a very simple one, but it's worth talking about. I've got that pattern there in the right hand. Now I could just play it with my 5th all the way through, and that's what I did to start with, I think. But then I switched to the 4th there, so the next time I was comfortable on that finger, so the next time round I had my pinky, my 5th ready for the G. Okay, so that's how this tutorial is going to be live hopefully later this week or next. That's going. So I've got the E flat, E flat, E flat chord, and then the G at the top. Now, if I had tried to play, in fact, I can put it down here, can't I? Because you can see it down there as well. If I'd tried to play bum 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 bum, if I'd stuck on the 5th, bum bum bum, oh dear, I've now got to play the 4th, I've got to play the G, I'd have to jump. Yeah. So it's about seeing what's coming next. It's not just about finding the comfortable notes. It's about having somewhere to go as well, if you see what I mean. So hopefully, Mark, that kind of answers your question. Think like a pool player, think like a snooker player. Ashwin, I have another more personal question. How many hours do you spend practicing a week? Not enough. It's a short answer. Not enough. I try to do about 20 minutes a day if I can. Something like 2 or 3 hours a week. I ought to do more, probably, but I spend so much time in front of the piano anyway, and a lot of the stuff I do, to be honest, constitutes practice. So this piece that I'm working on right now, I'm practicing it so that I can play it in a tutorial. And I have probably spent 2 or 3 hours practicing that over 2 or 3 days now. So it kind of comes and goes. I would recommend, if you're going through a period where you really need to improve, 20 minutes a day, but every day, if you can, or 6 days a week is a really important thing. Farouk, the mysterious creativity actually made a lot of sense. Well, that's a relief. No, you're welcome. Hey Bill, what do you think of the Alfred beginner book? I'm halfway through and getting bored of the pieces. Yeah, Alfred's very solid, but it's a bit old school. OBS, I would say. I mean, it's solid. The Complete Piano Player by what's his name, chap whose name I've forgotten, is also good, a bit livelier maybe. Or check out my beginner's piano course, which is completely free. Okay, so 20 lessons completely free of charge. Yeah, go and check those out. But yeah, Alfred is a solid course, but yeah, the stuff isn't that inspiring. Can you give some tips on how to change chord progressions? Kind of a big subject. What I would do is go and look at some of my chord tutorials, go into my actual YouTube channel and look for my playlist. There's a whole playlist of chord tutorials which will answer some questions like that, because you know that's kind of a big open, it's a really good question, low logic, but it's a kind of a big open-ended one. Mark, awesome, thanks Bill, good. I always like it when I answer a question and it makes sense. Susie Hack, answering Joe Bob, try to have a routine and make some timelines when you practice. Fantastic idea. 15 minutes with thought and concentration is more efficient than 40 minutes of playing what you already know. Absolutely. I could not agree more with that, Susie Hack. That is a brilliant, brilliant insight. It's about challenging yourself. It's about thinking and concentrating. Apoku, what are diminished chords in their usage? That's a diminished chord, that's a diminished 7th. You make a diminished chord by the basic diminished chord by finding the 7th note of any major scale. Yeah, you can do it off minors as well, but we use the major and building a simple chord off it. So that the diatonic diminished chord in C major is B diminished. What are their uses? Well, they are half of the dominant 7th chord. The typical use of diminished chords and diminished seventh chords are to create, if we're thinking in harmonic terms, they're to create instability. You can use them to resolve to lots of different keys. You know, and diminished chords will take you to all sorts of, you know, all sorts of different places. They create instability in your music, which will allow it to go off in strange directions. They're also, if you're composing, they're also the kind of the classic, the cliched horror movie chord. Yeah. But lots of things you can do with diminished chords. I've got a tutorial on diminished chords. It's called something like Chord Theory Epic Diminished Chords. Something like, search Bill Hilton diminished chords in YouTube and it will turn up. Okay, what makes the hands jump perfect and easy? Any tips, Ulas? Good question. If you have any tips for me, Ulas, I'd be really interested to know that. Jumping is really difficult, yeah? And one of the things that makes it difficult if you're reading music is that it's quite hard to jump without looking at the keyboard. Okay, so if I stop looking at the keyboard, I can probably still jump, but it's much harder, yeah, and I keep having to snatch glances. It's just a case of practicing. Practicing stuff that includes a lot of jumps, so you know, ragtime and things like that can really help. But practice. Brian, hello. When playing 12-bar blues, I love it when people mention 12-bar blues because that gives me an excuse to kind of show off. Say in C major, can you improvise in just the C scale, or do you have to change to F and G? This kind of comes back to what I was saying a minute or two, Brian. The simple answer is no, you don't have to change to F and G, you can stay in the C scale, but typically you would stay in the C blues scale. Probably also using the C pentatonic to use what I would call the extended C blues scale, which is basically every note more or less in the C, between C and C, black and white, except those three, okay? So, you know, let me just play through a quick blues. Deliberately making this quite scalular. Bit of a riff there. Even if you're playing New Orleans blues, which has non-diatonic chords in, which kind of does this towards the end. Yeah, you can still just get away with focusing on the scale. So what I would say, Brian, is focus when improvising, focus on the scale more than the chord. People worry about playing, I hate it when people do air quotes, but I'm going to do them. People worry about playing the wrong note against a chord, and don't worry about that. Yeah. When it comes to judging what is right and what is wrong, the first thing you should do is use your ears. Yeah. If it sounds good, then it's good. Okay. And you will find that if you focus on the scale and don't worry too much about the chord underneath it, then sometimes you will play things that don't sound right. So for example, if we were playing blues and I hit a major seventh, not really bluesy, but your ears can tell you that. Okay, that's the important thing. So focus on the scale and use your ears. Aridon, do you do one-to-one piano lessons when not in lockdown, of course, based in London? I don't. I mean, I have done them in the past, but no, I don't. You know, if someone was within, you know, kind of 5 miles of Thirsk in North Yorkshire, then I might think about it. But even then, I don't have a lot of time for that sort of thing, interesting enough. I spend so much time kind of composing and putting new resources and planning videos together, but planning videos that is actually what I do most of the time. Okay, Brian Rodrigo, how do you make piano playing sound professional? Really interesting questions. First of all, check out my How to Sound Like a Piano Pro series of tutorials that I did last year, because that takes a really simple piece and builds it out so it sounds really professional. So go and look at those tutorials, Brian, because they will really help. They really kind of dig into that. And sorry, I was just looking at other questions there. where was I? Yes, look at those tutorials. But also a lot of it, how to sound professional, is just about practicing the basics really well. So practicing your scales and practicing a variety of pieces, including ideally some classical pieces. The reason for that is because that really works on your touch and your control. If you listen to people who don't play the piano very often, or who aren't first instrument piano players, often sound quite blocky and chunky, and I often drag out poor old Paul McCartney at this point. Paul McCartney, who is second to none as a songwriter and marvellous, but if you hear him play the piano, especially back in the 70s or 60s, it's often a bit. John Lennon was the same in Imagine. Yeah, it's very. And you can tell that they haven't put in the hours, because they're guitarists and very good guitarists. They haven't really put in the hours kind of doing the classical stuff, doing the scales, all that kind of smoothness and fluidity that comes from that kind of thing, Brian. But as I say, do go and check out my How to Sound Like a Piano Pro. Okay, just a few more because we've done our hour, but we've still got some more good questions coming in. Soraya, hi Bill, can you explain how do you know what to play next when improvising? My mind usually goes blank while improvising, mine too, and I end up playing the same chords over and over again. I talked about this a little bit last time, but that's a really good question. When you're improvising, an awful lot of it is unconscious. People think that improvising is purely making things up as you go along, and actually it's not, okay? Yes, you are making things up as you go along, but what you're usually doing is just pulling out bits of pre-learned stuff that you kind of have at your fingertips and stringing them together. So when I was playing the blues there, let's do some more. If we break down what I was doing there, I played a little run to start with, and then I had this shape under my hands, and then this, and they're things that I do all the time, okay? So, and lots of others. And what's happening when I'm improvising is that I'm not thinking about which of those individual notes to play. Rather, I'm going to that little pattern that I have completely off the top of my head, that I've played so many times I can just do it automatically. And I string those things together. And that's how all improvisation works, really. It's people taking scales, even improvisers who are much better than me, people taking scales, ideas, and stringing them together. Sometimes you'll get conscious improvisation, but it's much kind of less common. The conscious thing is more kind of strategic. So you have these things under your fingers, and then what your conscious brain does is, next, I think I'm going to go higher. Oh, now we need a bit of contrast, need to go lower again. Or let's get a bluesier sounding. Let's go for that hard flat fifth. Yeah. So it's much more kind of strategic, if you see what I mean. So the question is, how do I practice that? Well, if you look at some of my tutorials, Jazz for Beginners, things like that, that'll give you some leads. But a lot of it comes down to, yes, playing that repetitive stuff over and over again and getting it under your fingers. Farouk, another composition question. As I said, composition questions really welcome, really important, because the day you become a musician is the day you become a composer. In your opinion, what are the two must-do habits and or traits that a composer must have or build to become productive and see progress without feeling repetitive? Off the top, I'm not a great composer. I do compose, but I'm not Beethoven. I would say, first of all, it's like writing. 3/4 of it is applying the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair. It's putting the time in. So Tchaikovsky, for example, was very dismissive about the idea of inspiration. I know I've just been talking about inspiration, but he used to dismiss it. He said, no, musical achievement comes from sitting down and sweating, and even though a lot of the stuff you produce will be rubbish, if you do that, good stuff will come out. So and Thomas Edison as well, the famous line about genius being 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. It's all about hard work. I would absolutely agree with that. So first must-do habit and trait of a composer is just sheer hard work and willing to put the hours in. Second must-have trait, difficult. It's the ability to switch judgment of yourself on and off. Okay, so often you'll be composing something, and piano players in particular often compose by improvising, and a lot of the time you'll have this inner voice saying, no, that's rubbish, that's terrible, that's awful, and the inner voice might be right, but you have to switch it off, else it's negative about everything. So you have to kind of get things out, get things down on paper, get them recorded without judging, but then switch the judgment on afterwards and say, yeah, that's okay, yeah, I can build on that, no, that's rubbish, chuck it out. So it's being able to suspend and then reapply your judgment when that is necessary. There are many more must-have traits that composers must have. I'm not even saying really that those two are the most important, although maybe dedication is the most important. I don't know, but those are two very important ones. Oh, that was a good question. Gino, I've one more question from Gino. Again, it's another really good one. I can't resist this one. I prefer smooth jazz rather than blues, really. Could you please give some examples of mellow, smooth jazz progressions? Well, exactly the same progressions, the same underlying progressions as blues, if you like, but you would harmonise them in a different way. So if we've got a simple 12-bar blues in C using C, F and G, if you wanted a cooler sound like that, you would use more kind of major extensions on your chords. So C major 7 at its simplest, or something like this. C9 with an added 6. F9 with an added 6. And there and this is kind of touching on what Laurie's asking. Laurie Mayers above you, jazz reharmonisation. Here I'm reharmonising my my dominant chord, G7. I've taken that and made it well, you could call that all sorts of things. I would probably call that F minor major 7 with a flat 5th over G, or something like that. Who cares what it's called? It's how it sounds. Okay, so that's how you get your rich, cooler sound, Gino. Yeah, but using the major extensions. Whereas bluesy sounds tend to use minor thirds and fifths, even in major keys. Cooler sort of jazz, more cocktail sounds tend to use those rich major. You're using more of that, the actual diatonic notes of the C major scale. Right, okay. Carl, tip, don't stress it. Some of the world's best musicians and singers can't read music. That is true. A lot of the best music was made by people who never had proper lessons, but they were all motivated. That's absolutely true. That's not an argument for not learning to read music, because I think everybody should. And I certainly think everyone should learn to improvise, which is downplayed in a lot of contemporary music teaching because it's really valuable. But yeah, hard work is an awful lot of what it comes down to. Donna Party Supplies, I'm 56, a new player, and I just finished your 20th lesson last week. It took me 13 months. Fantastic. I think that's about the right amount of time. Some people try to race through them too fast. 13 months for 20 lessons is about right. Thank you so much for posting all of these. On to more chord work and more pieces. Awesome, Jim. Jim, you're very welcome. I'm always, I really enjoyed doing that beginner's course, and when I hear that someone has got to the end of it, I'm always like, hooray, brilliant. And it also goes to show that age doesn't matter as much. I'm not saying that you're old, Jim, because 56, is only kind of a decade older than me. But people say, oh, I'm in my 40s, my 50s, I'm too old to learn piano. And certainly you won't learn as fast as someone who is 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, whatever, but you can still learn. It just takes a little bit more application. So well done, Jim. Keep going. Keep an eye out for the intermediate course, which more people keep asking for and will start coming soon. Brian, last one from me today. How do I find out when you're online? If you subscribe to my channel and then click the little bell icon, that will give you notifications. Also, if you follow me on Facebook and Twitter, when I'm doing live sessions, I will post on there 2 or 3 days in advance. Also, if you look at my YouTube community tab, which you should get notifications of if you click the bell icon when you subscribe, that will tell you. I'll make announcements on there when I do live stuff. Okay, I'm going to do 2 more questions. Lewis, a question from a total beginner. I'm curious, how do you play blind and fast using specific scale? If you mean not watching, then it just comes from practice. Okay, the thing I'd say to you, Lewis, is worry less about playing it fast than playing it accurately and playing it evenly. The most important thing about scales, I'm sorry, I was trying to do it without looking there and I was thinking about something else. Let's try again. It's to play them evenly. Trying to get an equal kind of weight on each note. Okay, so people think too much about speed and about being able to do things without watching, but think much more about the quality of the music you're making. If you're an absolute beginner, Lewis, absolutely the very best of luck to you, and give me a shout if I can help you in any way. Okay, one more lesson. One more question. Let's go for what kind of finger exercises will make you perfect? Well, I don't know about making you perfect, but scales, broken chords, whoops, clearly not perfect. I always make a mess when I'm doing stuff live. And arpeggios. Oh dear, I'm gonna have to stop soon because I'm losing it. Okay, so yeah, the really basic stuff. What you can do is get bending over. What you can do is get a book like this. Book of the ABRSM Manual of Scales, Broken Chords and Arpeggios, which takes you through all of this stuff. I mean, you can find all these online as well, but you know, there's enough exercises, arpeggios and scales in there to keep you going forever, really. Hello, change the setting on the piano. There we go. So that's it. I'm going to sign off now because we've done an hour and 10 minutes, and it's starting to get a little bit on the long side. And several people told me off last time because I made this epic video. So I'm going to try and keep these to an hour or not much longer. Massive thanks to everyone who's turned up. Just a quick ad, as I usually do for a couple of my books, including How to Really Play the Piano. I don't have to hold it up, do I? I can put it here. How to Really Play the Piano, the stuff your teacher never taught you. I wrote this 10 years ago now. It's a long time since I wrote this. I'm going to do a second edition soon, but a lot of people really seem to like this book. It's all the basics of chords and how to start improvising and things like that, and you know, the stuff your piano teacher never taught you. This is a really old copy. You can see my wife marking it up when she was proofreading it. This is, I think the very first print copy I had. You do need to be able to read basic music for that, but if you can, then it will take you through all the sort of basic chord stuff. Also 7 studies in pop piano, if you like that kind of pop piano style that I was playing around with. Oh yes, I'm going to black up right now. That's what happens when I rest books on the piano. You know, that kind of ballad piano style, and 7 studies in pop piano will help. 7 pieces of music written in that kind of style and styles like it, with lots of explanatory notes. Again, you need to be able to read music, but not at a very complicated level. And you get a free quote from Thelonious Monk: "The piano ain't got no wrong notes." Fantastic advice, that. Okay, there is another tutorial coming soon. As I say, I've been writing this piece called Hambleton Mosses, which I'm doing a tutorial on. Those of you who are interested in intermediate stuff, so Brian, you might find this handy because it's aimed at people who have been through my beginner's course. And that's kind of it. So thanks for turning up. Hope you enjoyed it. Gino, thanks again, you're the best. Thanks, Gino, really appreciate it. Helkai, Paul, you're all really welcome. I will be doing more of these at different times, so some in my evenings that are good for the States and some in my mornings that are good for people east of me in Asia and Australia and all the rest of it. And yeah, follow me on Facebook and Twitter and all of that sort of stuff, and I really appreciate you all turning up. I will see you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.